Hi, it's me again. It's Andrea Lewis Events. Thank you for joining us for the second week in our wedding planning series. Today we're going to talk about the guest list and who to take off that guest list if need be, and how you can really just kind of par that guest list down to who you can actually afford to invite to your wedding. It's very important that you realize that this is who you can actually afford to invite to your wedding. So the rules of engagement, that's my little pun. So the rules of engagement are that unless you have unlimited funds, everyone can come. So let's just start there and go ahead and feel good about yourself, that you're not being a mean person because you're having to take some people off your guest list. You're not a bad bride. You're not a bad groom. So let's just start right there. It's okay. So your guest list, as we kind of touched on last week, always comes back to the amount of money that you're going to spend at your wedding. Okay. So let's say you have 200 guests at your wedding at $150 each, and that's not catering that I'm talking about. That's not food. That's your overall cost that you have divided by the number of guests. That's how you get your per person cost. So let's say you have 200 guests at $150 a head. You're looking at having a $30,000 wedding. Just by pulling that guest list down by 75 people to 125, you still have the same wedding planned, but you've brought that cost down to about $18,750. So it's always the guest list that's going to increase your cost. And not necessarily the vendors. So sometimes I'll have couples that will say, well, we need the caterer to take this out and take that out. And at the end of the day, when you really put pen to paper, you realize that you're only talking about pennies in comparison to the 60 or even 20 extra wedding guests that you have on your list. So everything comes back to the guest list and the wedding, and as far as what your money goes. Now, here's the thing. Who do you cut? The most common question, bar none, that I get, and I'm sure all wedding planners get this, is do I invite everybody in my office? So again, if you're asking that question, then probably there's a cost issue. I know we keep going back to that, but if you're asking that question, there probably is a cost issue. So the simple answer is no, you can't invite everybody. You cannot invite everybody in your office. You definitely want to invite your immediate boss. That is a must. But if you're in an office of 25 people or a larger office of 100 people, they will understand that you couldn't invite them, probably because of space limitations or because of costs. Because if you really think about it, in an office with 100 people, more than likely this is not the first wedding that's come up where everybody couldn't be invited. So you're really okay. I have lots and lots of brides and grooms that are apprehensive about that, but you really are okay. But you absolutely need to, and it's very, very nice to invite your immediate boss, and then at least send an invitation to, let's say, the president of your company if you work for an office or something of that nature, to at least send that person one. But because of maybe showing favoritism, that person probably won't show. Now, with me saying they won't show, this is the next thing I want to go into. Do not build your guest list with the thought that I'm going to invite these people, but they're not going to show up. You will be very, very surprised at who will send back an RSVP and say that they are coming. So pull that guest list down to who you absolutely would like to have at your wedding before you send out your invitations, okay? So that you don't have any surprises. That person that said, I have to go out of the country the weekend of your wedding, and so you said, well, I'm just going to send him and his family an invitation, and surprised, his overseas trip got canceled, and now this guest and his wife and their 5 children are all coming. So unless you can really afford to have a family of 7, then just go ahead and pull down the guest list to who you can really, really afford to have. Now, talking about the affordability of the guests, you don't want your guests to pay for your party. So if you are having your reception or even your wedding at a venue that does not have ample parking around it, and let's say there's a parking structure, a paid parking structure, then what you want to do is negotiate a rate with that parking structure or with that hotel, and then you do want to go ahead and put that cost out there and then hand out tickets, perhaps at the ceremony. Have your ushers to hand out tickets to those people so that they can have free parking, because if a lot of your guests are from out of state or from out of town and they aren't familiar with that particular venue, they're not going to know I need to have $20 in cash to pay for parking for this. So you want to make it a nice event, as seamless as possible for your guests. This is, after all, probably one of the biggest parties that you are ever going to host. And if you think about it in that way, that you as the bride and groom are hosting a very large party, it'll kind of help you, make some of those tough decisions that you need to make. So also with affordability, no cash bars. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, and there are a lot of schools of thought, pros versus cons. I am absolutely against cash bars because, again, you're hosting a party and you don't want to invite your guests and then ask them to pay for the party. Do what you can afford to do. If you can't do a full bar, do just a champagne toast, do just wine and beer only. Your guests are still going to have a great time if you present, a great party to them. I promise you they are going to be okay. So pulling down your guest list, just look at everything that's on the table in front of you, and it really will help you to make those decisions. I'll tell you a funny story and then we're going to be done for the day. But I met with a bride recently who had two sisters, and she said that if a wedding guest could not pick her out of a lineup with her and her two sisters, then they couldn't come. Now, that's a funny way to look at it, but it's something that's kind of true. It's almost like spring cleaning. When you clean out those closets, you typically look at what you have not worn in a year or maybe 2 years. Kind of the same thing with the guest list. If you haven't spoken with or been in contact with that particular guest, or your parents have not been in contact with them, then it's probably okay to go ahead and leave them off the guest list and then still feel comfortable about that, okay? So, guest, who's coming to dinner? That was our topic for today. Next week, we will talk about location. I'm going to tell you some of the great venues in and around our city, and then how to find the best venue for you in the city that you are in, okay? Thanks so much. You can join us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Andrea Lewis Events, website www.alewisevents.com. Our blog is www.theplannerpages.com. And then, of course, if you're watching this, you're probably already on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/alewisevents. So again, same as I said last week, you don't have to remember all of those web addresses. Just remember one, and one will get you everywhere else that you need to go, okay? Happy planning, and see you next week. Bye-bye.